Good morning. I'm Jason Isaacson, the Director of Government and International Affairs of the American Jewish Committee. I want to welcome this audience in this room to this very important debate, how the U.S. should deal with Iran. I want to welcome viewers who are watching us on C-SPAN. I would like to also welcome our worldwide audience on our HAC webcast. Also want to remind viewers that if they would go to the HAC.org website, you will be able to join in this discussion and pose questions to our debaters. This morning we will be debating the issue that is vexing the U.S. government and governments around the world: how to deal with Iran, how to thwart that reckless regime's quest for nuclear weapons capability. Secretary of State Clinton cited this as a U.S. priority in her speech to us last night. We'll devote the next hour and a half to the question of how that priority, that U.S. priority, can be translated into tangible results. And our speakers are Roger Cohen, columnist for the New York Times, and Bret Stephens, a columnist and deputy editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal. We'll begin with opening statements. First to you, Roger.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Warren Christopher once called Bosnia, where I worked for many years, the problem from hell. Well, Iran makes Bosnia look like child's play. There are no good options, and the debilitating Iranian-American psychosis, with its deep historical roots, has lasted 31 years now, casting a shadow over the world. Well, to decide policy, we need to know something about the country concerned. What is Iran, where I spent 5 weeks last year? It's a young society. 2/3 of the people are under 35, more than 4 million kids in college, and more than half of those are women. They're thirsting for contact with the outside world. They're living in an Islamic republic which is Shia, not Sunni like Al-Qaeda, since the revolution of 1979. They're largely disillusioned with Islamism. They're not dreaming like those guys in the caves in Waziristan of some resurrected caliphate. No, they want greater pluralism, and that's something they've quested for since the uprising of 1905 against the Qajar dynasty. That questing is not going to go away. In many respects, Iran is very secular. What's its psychology? Well, it's marked by the Iran-Iraq War of 1980 to 88, 1 million dead, that's their First World War, in which young officers like now President Ahmadinejad fought a US-backed Saddam Hussein, who, with the help of the West, it's painful to admit this, gassed tens of thousands of Iranians with chemical weapons. It's attracted, in its overwhelming majority, despite this experience and despite the US role in the 1953 overthrow of the democratically elected Mossadegh, it's attracted to the United States, and it's yearning for an ever-elusive normalization. This is a country where the tired Friday prayers routine, Marg Bar America, death to America, has all the impact on people of Muzak in an elevator. What they really want are diesel genes. In many respects, the United States and Iran are unnatural enemies. Unnatural enemies, ladies and gentlemen. Well, what about the regime presiding over this? Well, there's a clerical superstructure, as you know, with a supreme leader, Khamenei, who is said to be standing in for the Prophet. His enforcers are the Revolutionary Guards, an elite but increasingly powerful and wealthy group whose role in the appalling post-election clampdown has been central, and who control the trafficking that circumvents sanctions. 20% of the Dubai economy is said to be linked to this sanctions circumventing activity. This regime is intermittently brutal and consistently so since the election last year, but it has allowed periods of liberalization, and it's not the monolithic totalitarian state that Saddam's Iraq was, let alone Nazi Germany. I lived in Germany for some years. We should be very careful, out of respect for the dead, in making facile analogies. Last year, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel described the regime as a messianic, apocalyptical cult. This year, Ehud Barak, the defense minister of Israel, who was here last night, said the regime was not Meshugana and has a, quote, sophisticated decision-making process. As you can see, its nature is in dispute, and I hold the Barak view. Now, for a long time, this Islamic Republic, and most Iranians think both words should count, Islamic Republic, has pursued an ominous but still ambiguous nuclear program and combined that of late with grotesque Holocaust denial and annihilationist outbursts from Ahmadinejad against Israel. It has, in addition, of course, close links with Hezbollah, which is Shia, and significant, if less close, links with Hamas in Gaza. So what should the United States do? How do we help this young society move forward to some more representative form of government and, at the same time, make sure it doesn't build or test a nuclear device? I think there are a few general principles that I'll quickly outline before concluding. The first, isolation. The hardliners thrive on it. Not for nothing is it that Iran was on a razor's edge, came to the brink within months of Obama's outreach, while Ahmadinejad thrived on President Bush's axis of evil grandstanding. Sanctions. Iran has been living with them for decades and in general is a patient inoculated against them. Maybe we can improve the virus, but we're dealing with a body that has a heavy dose of inoculation. Ratcheting up sanctions, and this week on the Hill, we've heard a lot of words like crushing, crippling, suffocating, devastating. They tend only to inspire more elaborate means around them, and the Revolutionary Guards profit. Preservation. The Supreme Leader's title is Guardian of the Revolution. That's his role. He's in the preservation business, a conservative business, a cautious business. Building a weapon, let alone testing one, let alone threatening Israel with one, represents caution thrown to the winds. It puts the Islamic Republic at immediate risk. We should recall this in assessing how real the threat Iran poses is. History. We know what happens when Iran is attacked. Saddam Hussein attacked Iran in 1980. All Iranians, irrespective of their political beliefs, rallied around. They are patriots. Do we want to save the revolution and lock it in for another 30 years and lock in the hardliners running it through another attack? Volatility. The Iran of today is not the Iran of June 12. Society and the regime are moving in different directions. A lot of young people who were reluctantly acquiescent are now firmly in opposition. This says to me that there's a lot to be said for patience and quiet probing. Mousavi, the moderate opposition leader, has called for another big day of protest and is now trying to bring in the labor movement on the first anniversary of the election on June 12. Finally, inspections. It often gets forgotten that Iran, unlike Israel, unlike North Korea, unlike India and Pakistan, is still a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. IEA inspectors are at Natanz day after day, labeling those centrifuges, labeling what the centrifuges produce. If Iran is really going to rush for a weapon, and assuming there isn't some vast underground facility we don't know about, they have to reverse engineer thousands of these centrifuges and enable them to produce highly enriched uranium, presumably under the inspection of the IAEA. And that, of course, would not be allowed to happen. Despite Iran's long history of duplicity, I think we have to bear that in mind. Now, I'll conclude by saying that given all this, I think President Obama has been about right. He's been right to have pursued outreach and left that offer on the table, and to intimate that Iran could pursue a limited, monitored, civilian and peaceful nuclear program if it comes clean with the international community and if it honors its international commitments. He's been right to have made clear that the military option is a terrible option, a near unthinkable one, and to have urged Israel, which has never, remember, fought a war with Iran, never been at war with the Persians, and indeed cooperated with Iran for a long time, to refrain from attacking Iran. Right the President has been to be skeptical of all those draconian sanctions being discussed on the Hill and look instead to get the Security Council with China and Russia to vote measures, because it's international isolation, above all, that Iran fears. Right to beef up Gulf defenses as deterrent. Right, however remote, to keep a strong focus on Israel-Palestine peace that would defang Iran's rhetoric. Right to denounce human rights abuses in Iran since June 12, although he should have done it more emphatically. Right to ratchet down the war of words with Iran and believe that an Iranian reconciliation could be a breakthrough as momentous for the world as Nixon's 1972 visit to China. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not beautiful, it's not exalting, it doesn't necessarily make us feel good, but it's about the best we can do in the circumstances. And after Iraq, I think we owe ourselves a course of sobriety, however difficult that may be.
Thank you very much, Roger. Bret Stephens, please.
Well, good morning. Many thanks to the American Jewish Committee for doing me the honor of inviting me to this stage, and thanks also to Roger for sharing it with me. Roger and I are here because we agree about one thing, and probably only one thing, which is that Iran is indeed the single greatest foreign policy challenge that the Obama administration will face in the next 3 or 7 years. But on other points, we don't see eye to eye. For instance, when Roger wrote last year on his first trip to Iran that the Iranians were looking for reform but were in no mood for an upheaval, I disagreed with him then. And I think the facts, as they played out over the next few months, did not bear Roger out. And when he wrote, referring to the then forthcoming June 12 election, that it would be a, quote, genuine contest, and that Iran's democracy was, quote, vibrant, at least by Middle Eastern standards, I disagreed with that too. All Iranian elections are shams, Roger, all of them. Or would you, as an American citizen, have an election in which a supreme leader named Pat Robertson offered you the choice between 2 candidates, one Pat Buchanan and the other Mike Huckabee? So if that's the case, why do you accept that kind of regime on behalf of the Iranians? And finally, when Roger was urging that the Iranians could surely be brought about to a so-called grand bargain, some of us had some doubts, given Iran's unbroken record of deception and hostility. And in fact, that's precisely what happened. Sometime in March, Roger wrote that President Obama had done exactly what he had asked him to. And we've seen how it's played out since then in terms of the success of the of President Obama's outreached hand. So Roger, your record of prediction here is not a good one. I'm glad you're a columnist. I think if you were in a hedge fund, you'd be John Paulson in reverse, going long on MBS sometime in September of '08. Now this gets to the most basic differences between us, between Roger and I. The difference is this. Broadly speaking, at the strategic and ideological level, I take the Iranians at their word. And it seems, reading all 40-odd columns you've written about Iran, that you don't. So when Ahmadinejad says, wipe Israel off the map, and by the way, that was not a mistranslation, as some people would tell you, I think he means it. And when he denies the Holocaust, I think he believes it. And yes, I think sometime in the course of this debate, Roger will accuse me of a certain kind of emotionalism. He spoke today, or just earlier, of the debilitating psychosis, but Holocaust denial is something that ought to scare every single one of us in this room. It is a crime, and we ought to treat it as such and not let it lapse just because he repeats it so often. So when the regime sends its goon squads into the streets of Tehran to chant death to America or death to Israel, and Roger only hears Muzak, I think they mean it too. And I think you can't engage a regime whose central ideological pillar is to hate you, is to hate America, is to hate Israel, is to hate everything the West stands for. It's to hate the rationality, or the rationality that we stand, at least as it's developed in the West. Now, you seem to think that all of these phrases are really no more